When I was 18, I was a freshman in college, and I had grown up in a real stable home. My parents are still together, a lot of good things. I grew up in the suburbs, and it was just about, chase the American dream. You go to school, and then you try and figure out what you want to do next. And so I was at a spot where I was trying to find happiness, and you get a little more freedom in college, right? So I started to get in some trouble and try some things that were not good for me, but they looked fun at first. So I started going down that path and really never thought about bigger questions like purpose. It was all just about, hey, what will make me happy today, tomorrow? What can I do? What's next? It was all about me and wound up in a bad spot. And there were a couple people that talked to me here and there about bigger things in life and things of God, and it really didn't make sense to me. I kind of just ignored it, didn't pay attention to it. Well, it kept getting worse. And it wasn't until in my freshman year in the winter, the weather was kind of like this. It was super cold out one night, and this one guy I knew that was kind of different. He was a cool guy. I liked him, but he was kind of different. Partially, he didn't drink with the rest of us. He didn't talk like the rest of us, so he's a little odd, but in a good way. He invited me to church. And I remember it was such a cold night, I didn't want to do anything else, so I said, yeah, I'll go to church. Didn't expect a whole lot, to be honest, because growing up, I had gone to church, was baptized as a baby, went through traditional church, but never really connected with my heart or soul. I mean, I went through the motions, but didn't make any difference in my life, so I had dropped going to church as soon as I could. But I went to a church that actually taught a clear message about Jesus Christ and the gospel, and you need to repent of your sins, and you've done wrong, and he died on the cross for your sin, and believe in him, and you can have a different life. Well, right there, it made sense, and the Lord opened my eyes, and I made that commitment, gave my life to Christ. My life started to change right there. And then it was a journey, though. Moving on from there, I still didn't understand much about purpose. It was just like, okay, now I have some peace, and I can try and enjoy life, and I know God's got some boundaries on me now, but I'll still just try and have happiness and include God in it. And over time, though, I began to understand some things about finding my purpose in him. Changed my life, an amazing thing. And then a few years later, long story short, the Lord led me to a spot where I was really looking to find a home church when I moved back to the suburbs here after being in college. And a friend of mine was coming here to New Life in Back of the Yards. And I never even heard of Back of the Yards, but hey, I'll go with you because I like this guy. And I came to church, fell in love with it, heard Pastor Mark preaching and met a whole bunch of people, and it was alive. And I jumped in, moved right to Brighton Park, got involved, and I found a deeper purpose in life. And I've been here ever since. They can't get rid of me. Amen. But I believe some of you today, some of you are here and you may be a believer like I was, where you have God in your life, but you don't really think about purpose. It's just about how can I be happy? And God is kind of on the side. I want to speak to you today. I believe this can help you understand why you should do things and also be able to explain it to other people. Because you might be that guy like my friend in college that you seem a little odd, you seem a little strange to some of your coworkers, some of your neighbors. Hopefully they like you and you're different. Let's say extraordinary instead of odd, okay? You seem kind of exceptional, and they don't understand. Why do you live the way you do? Why don't you go along with this stuff? And I want to motivate you to explain your faith, and you talk about purpose of life with them to hopefully influence them. And then there may be some of you here who are like I was when I was 18. You just don't get it. You're just trying to live to make yourself happy day to day. It's not working. Maybe someone brought you here, you're listening online or whatever, and you're trying to figure it out. And I hope today you can understand that you find your purpose. It starts in Jesus Christ. So I hope to motivate you with that today. So purpose of life, what is it? I want to invite you to write down 5 words. I'm a simple guy. I can't remember tons of stuff. To me, it helps to have handles that you can remember a message. 5 words. So if you want to take your bulletin, write this down. You'll get the main points of this message, and I think it'll help you to remember it. First word is purpose, because that's the whole theme. Second word is image. Image. And we actually understand something about image when we compare ourselves with animals, believe it or not. The Bible says in the book of Proverbs, consider the ant. So you can actually learn something by looking at animals. Let me ask you, who has a pet at home? How many of you pet people? All right, good, a lot of pet people. Who owns a dog? Yeah, it's fun walking that dog now, ain't it? Yeah, boy. Who owns a cat? Some of you don't want to walk them. You just like a cat. Okay, who owns a dog and a cat? All right, good. You guys like drama, right? You like competition. That's good. We're not much of a pet family. My wife and I, we're blessed with 3 children. And my wife and one of my kids are very allergic. I mean, if they see a picture of a dog, they start to sneeze. So we're not a big pet family. Fish are as far as we go. I always wind up cleaning the bowl. But that's who we are. But some of you have different ideas. By the way, I remember one time years ago meeting a family at church, and they were brand new. And one of my roles, you see me a lot floating around on Sundays and during the week. My role is small groups, getting people connected, helping people to take their next step. That's why I love what we're doing after this service out in the lobby, helping people to get involved and grow, really, and get involved in relationships and minister. So I'm always about that. I like to meet new people. And this one woman at church said, hey, can you have a couple people come to my apartment and pray for our apartment and bless it? I'm brand new here, and we really want to change the way we're living. So I went with a couple of people to this lady's apartment, a single mom with her kids, and she was real gracious and let us in and showed us around. And then she said, come here. And she was excited to bring us in this other room. She said, look, right here is our pet snake. Wow, I mean, big old snake. And he was giving me an evil eye. And she said, hey, do you want to hold him? And you know, when you visit someone, you want to be friendly and go along with whatever they suggest, right? But I said, nah, I don't need to hold him. And I remember, no kidding, she was upset. She said, no, really, don't you want to hold him? I said, no, really, I don't need to hold him, right? So I never did hold that snake. And we sat down and talked, got to know her, and I was always looking over to make sure that snake was still in the aquarium. But you can learn a lot from animals. You really can. Look with me at Genesis 1, 26 and 27. Right near the beginning of the Bible, we read this, and this will help us understand our purpose, okay? So we're talking about image. The Bible says this right in the beginning, then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. In other words, we're the boss. Animals need to be treated, with respect in a way. I'm not talking about cruelty to animals. We treat people, God's creation, with respect, but we are supposed to be in authority. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. Now think about it. Animals have some basic needs, right? They eat, they drink, they sleep, maybe they hunt and gather, and they have babies, and they go through their life cycle, and then they die. Pretty much the same. It's a beautiful thing. It's God's will for their lives, but it hasn't changed a whole lot. Like animals probably don't say to each other, hey, you remember back in the day when things were different? Right? No, they just keep doing the same thing. They're not like, culture hasn't changed that much for them. They don't develop other things. That's their life. It's the animal life, and that's good for them. We're called to something different. We're made in God's image. So we still have to eat and drink and do the physical things, but we're called to a higher level of living. So what does it mean being made in God's image? I mean, we have a different way of thinking, different capacities, different emotions. We have a conscience, unlike animals. We have an ability to relate to God. We have a soul that is different than animals, right? Now, there's great things about this. There's tremendous possibilities. And so we can do honorable things that animals can't. And that's why, people do certain heroic things and we celebrate it. I mean, you don't see animals making statues to other animals or having parades for them, right? That's like a human thing. We recognize there's certain things that are so honorable. We want to copy those and honor those people. We also have the ability to do shameful things, unlike animals. Things that are so bad and awful that they can lead people to the pits of despair and depression where they never want to live again. And we can do horrible things to one another and all kinds of abuse. And you don't worry about animals making nuclear weapons and destroying people, right? But that's a human problem because we have that capacity for evil. So we're different than animals. I want you to see that we're made in the image of God. So our purpose is greater than animals. If you live just an animal life, just eat, drink, physical things, just get through it, it seems easy, it seems simple, but really you're living way below your purpose. Now let me say on a side note, some people will say to you, if you talk about this, yeah, really, we're just an animal. That's all we are. We're the most developed animals. We used to be animals, and we just some of us developed into human beings by chance, lucky. We just kind of developed. Don't believe it, all right? That's a huge topic. A lot we could talk about that. Love to talk about that with you. By the way, the exploregod.com website, which is backing up a lot of the teachings on this message, great place to go. Tons of things there. You can look at articles, videos that get more in depth. Let me just give you one simple story. Maybe this will help if you talk to someone that says, hey, we're just animals. We just developed into humans. Here's how I like to picture it. Think of cars. My wife and I, we own a Ford Escape. I like our Ford Escape. It works. It's fine. It's the right car for us. Not going to win any awards, but that's okay, you know? It's a good car. I've been happy with it. So we have our Escape. It's all good. But that Ford Escape, that's a picture of a new one. Ours looks a little more worn, but it's basically the same car. Our Escape will never be a Ford Mustang. Ain't going to get there. No matter how much time and chance and what happens, no matter how much we wash it, it's never going to develop into a Mustang. You know why? Because they're made different from the start. If you go to a Ford Motor Plant, you'll see they have one line for the Escapes, right? They're made specifically to be Escapes. Another one for the Mustangs, another one for the Explorers and everything else, right? Now, a mechanic would say, hey, they use a lot of the same parts, a lot of the same strategies and how to fit everything in there. You know why? Because the same designer made them. There's similarities between a Mustang and an Escape. There's similarities between us and an animal, but it doesn't mean you came from an animal. You were different from the start. The same designer made you that made all the other creatures, but you're different. You have a soul that is unlike any other creature. So we're made in the image of God. We're different. This whole distinction came up actually in the temptation of Jesus. That amazing story in Matthew 4. Think about it. Jesus fasted for 40 days, and we're just wrapping up a fasting season here now. Jesus fasted, and as he was preparing for public ministry, and a whole big story there. But at that critical moment when he was right at the end of his fast, he was weak, and the devil came to him. The devil knows when to go after you, right? And he tempted him. He said, if you are the Son of God, because the devil loves to challenge your identity and plant that seed of doubt. He said, if you're the Son of God, then remember the first thing he tempted him with? Tell these stones to become bread. Why? You're hungry. Just feed your appetite. That's all life is. He was tempting Jesus in a sense to just live a physical life, just an animal life. Jesus doesn't go for it. Look at what he says. He says, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes out of the mouth of God. What is he saying? Bread's important. We have to eat. Jesus came down here, became a person. He had to eat just like anybody. But he said the body isn't the only thing. And sometimes the body, the physical needs are put aside for the spiritual needs. We live not just by bread, but by being in relationship with God. We literally feed off of what God says. We need a connection with him. It's both through the Bible, because God speaks through his word, but also through his spirit in us and around us. God speaks. The Bible says, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your heart. We need that for our life. So Jesus tells the devil, I'm not just going to live a physical life. I rely on the Lord. So life is more than the animal life, you could say, right? It's one other picture besides cars, one that helps talk about the distinction between different things. Think about phones, all right? Phones have really changed a lot, right? So a landline phone has been around a long time. And if you're younger than 20, 25 years old, a landline phone is a phone that's bigger and it sits in a house and it's got a cord that goes into a wall, okay? You've seen it in movies, right? They're not as popular now. That's a landline phone. Hey, here's what a landline phone can do. Receive calls and make calls. It's real good at that. That's it, right? A cell phone is different. A cell phone, man, you can text, you can go on the internet, you can download apps. You can download apps that'll tell you everything to do. They'll schedule your life, run your life. You can download apps that'll tell you, hey, you've been sitting too long. Get up and walk around. You need some exercise, right? It's amazing what you can do with a cell phone. It has a very high ceiling, also a very low floor. You can get in a lot of trouble with a cell phone that you wouldn't get in trouble with on a landline, right? So there's different potential. A cell phone is way more developed. So they're both phones, but the landline is like the animal. It's just real basic. This is what it is. Now, if you have a cell phone, it's kind of a shame if you buy like the latest model cell phone and you just put it in your house, you plug it in, and you only use it to make phone calls. It's like, man, you're kind of wasting the potential. You might as well just have a landline phone and save some money, right? You ever have someone that you know that has a real nice cell phone, but they don't really use it, they don't like it, they don't even set up their voicemail. Isn't that annoying? You call someone, it's like, you've had this phone for a year, you never even set up your voicemail. You never answer texts, and they're like, I can't figure it out. Just get a landline phone, come on. But you see, you're like that developed phone. You have the capacity for so much more good and so much more evil. So the animal life is not for us. And we kind of sense this in our spirit. There's a famous quote that says, there is a God-shaped hole in the human heart that only God can fill. So when we live just a physical life, sometimes we have those longings, that sense that there's more to life. I should be doing more. I should be experiencing more. We capture this somewhat in movies and music, right? I mean, every movie is usually about some great thing that someone is called to, something heroic, or maybe something terrible that someone falls into. And there's a different stories, falling in love, and then they break up and they fall back in love, or some horrible crisis and a hero has to come in and intervene and save the day, or people that are on a journey from one place to another and they have to overcome all the obstacles, right? No one makes a movie like just a guy, I went to work, I came home, I did my laundry, I fell asleep, right? That wouldn't be a good movie. Like, there's more to life. We know it inside of us. We crave that, we want that. One of the things I get to do as a pastor, I get to go to a lot of wakes and funerals. And it's really shaped my life, going to wakes and funerals. It's amazing. It reminds you, first of all, we're all going to die, right? Sometimes younger, sometimes older. No matter what your background is, wherever you grew up, no matter how much money you have, how you identify in your life in different ways, we are all passing through. It's a really sobering thing. But it also is sobering to think when you talk to a family. A lot of times when I talk to someone's wake or funeral, it may be someone I don't know very well. It's a relative of someone at church. And so I say, well, tell me about this person. And sometimes they kind of look down and they're trying to think of some story. And sometimes they pause and they hesitate. And it's kind of a sad moment. I mean, I know that maybe they're just overwhelmed with the situation, but I'm thinking, this is your close relative. You should have some great things to say about them. And sometimes people really struggle to come up with something because it seems like that person wasn't real clear with maybe their purpose or what they did in their life. But it's great when someone has had a clear life where they really lived out their purpose. And it's more than just getting through daily life. At a wake or a funeral, no one gets up and says, this person, they kept their house clean, or they bought 2,000 things off of Amazon, or nobody, like, that's part of life, but that's not the essence of life. We know at a wake or funeral, it's the big things that really last and leave a legacy, right? So, purpose and image. Image, you're created in God's image. There's a hole inside of you. There's something you're supposed to do. Next word I want you to write down is missed. Missed, okay? There's a guy in the Bible that really experienced a lot of wealth, prosperity. He did things on a big scale. He actually would fit into America because in our culture here, we're a consumer culture, right? Big time. I mean, business drives so much of things in America. There's a lot of good with that. I'm thankful for a lot of that, but we can't let that be the center of life. If we think the purpose of our life is just to make a lot of money and spend a lot of money, we'll be empty. So much of America is about training you. In a sense, our culture disciples you to be a consumer from the time you're very young, right? I mean, it's like when a baby leaves the hospital after being born, they give it a credit card application. This is what you're supposed to do and be, is just buy things and pay for them, buy things and pay for them, right? There's something more in life. So let's look at this man, Solomon. He was one of the wealthiest people in the Bible, King David's son. He became king in Israel when it was at its peak of prosperity and wealth and power. And he had grown up with a faith. He knew about God. He had worshiped the Lord. He had some deep experiences with the Lord, but then he strayed from them when he experienced power and prosperity and temptation. Look at what he says, Ecclesiastes 1. This is a book that he wrote, Ecclesiastes, and he also wrote most of the Proverbs after he reached the end of his life and turned back to God. He wrote about how he wasted all these years. Listen to this. Chapter 1, verse 2, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And that word is repeated over and over in the book. Meaningless, emptiness, futility. It's like a breath. The word could be translated that way, or like mist. This kind of pictures it, just a mist of water. It's solid in the bottle, but when it's sprayed, it just doesn't last long, right? It just evaporates and gives you an immediate sensation. If I sprayed you in the face, you'd be a little upset, right? You feel it for a minute, but really it just evaporates and has no long-term impact. So much of life is that way, meaningless. So Solomon, follow along, chapter 1, verse 18, he says, after he had pursued knowledge, he was an intellectual guy, a scholastic guy. He gathered people from all over other countries, learned as much as he could about every different area. And then he said this, for with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. It's not bad to have knowledge. Obviously, an education is a good thing, but if it's the center of our life, it'll leave us empty. You ever learn about things and sometimes you feel like, I don't want to hear anything else? Like when you watch the news, sometimes you say, I know too much. It gets depressing, right? If that's all I look at is what's happening around me, it's just grief and sorrow. I need to know some things, but there needs to be more to life than just knowledge. Well, he went on, chapter 2, he decides to go and just try and enjoy life. I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. And you can read about all the things he dived into. He was a consumer. If he was around now, they'd have a reality show about him. And he went all out. But at the end of it all, he said, empty. It's just kind of that mist. Well, then he decided to really do everything he could in his job as the king and build up the country. And says in verse 9, I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet, when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Just a mist. Even if you're successful, so just survival sometimes is attractive. I just want to get by. But in success, for some of us, we believe we can achieve some level of success in an area, and we go for it and we go after it. Again, if you got the right foundation with the Lord, it can work. But without God, it's going to ultimately wind up in emptiness. Sometimes you hear rich and famous people talk about this, even if they're not Christians or they haven't necessarily turned to God, they talk about how life is just kind of empty and they seem like they're not enjoying it. I saw this quote from the actor Jim Carrey, who said, I hope everybody could get rich and famous and will have everything they ever dreamed of so they will know that it's not the answer, right? I don't think he's got a faith in God as far as I know, but he's been down the road of riches and fame and finding out it doesn't really answer his deepest need, right? I like the saying that came out in 1968. You still hear it referenced sometimes about our culture. It says, everyone gets to be famous for 15 minutes. Somehow that's stuck, right? It just kind of resonates in America that we pursue being great. And some of us, we can get some level of greatness in some area, but it's so temporary, right? Today, it's like everyone could be trending for 5 minutes, right? That's kind of our culture. You may be able to get some attention and do something that people notice and they applaud you for it and they celebrate you, but then it's on to the next person and the next one. And if that's all you live for, it's empty at the end of it. So the mist, it just doesn't lead to anything lasting. So don't settle for the animal life, first of all. And I know that for some of us, at one point, maybe you tried something great. You had hopes and dreams when you were younger, but it didn't work out. You suffered some rejection or disappointment or failure. It's easy to just withdraw into that physical life only. I'm just going to get by. I'm going to enjoy what's around me, eat, drink, be happy. I'm not going to try and do anything great. I'm telling you that void is still inside of you. Don't deny it. Maybe some things haven't gone right, but you need to still pursue a higher level of living. You're made in the image of God, but it's not all about you. Don't just be a consumer, because that's missed. So what's the answer? The answer is having God in our life, right? So look at what Solomon said. This is a third word I want you to write down is revolution. Revolution. Image, mist, revolution. Revolution is about a change in authority, right? About replacing one authority with another. And so in history, of course, countries that go through a revolution are countries that enough people are upset, angry, suffering enough that they want different leadership. You don't have a revolution when there's just minor problems. That's when you have reformation and some changes. Revolution is when people are so upset. Isn't it a tragedy to hear about like Venezuela right now? People starving to death, and that's why they're on the verge of a revolution. Why? Because people are so unhappy, there's a big push for change. Well, in our personal lives, often we have to reach some desperate spot before we're willing to change. Like they say in 12 steps, right? You have to hit your rock bottom when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. Then you're willing to go through the pain of change. Well, look at what Solomon says here. The end of the book of Ecclesiastes, he reached that point. He says, now all has been heard, chapter 12, verse 13. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. And then he says this in Proverbs. I love this. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. The fear of the Lord. It's easier to talk about the goodness of God, his love, his blessings for us, and we like that. And we put verses like that on our refrigerator, right? Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. We love that, of course. But there are these realities in the Bible too. Jesus says, fear him. Speaking of God, fear him who can kill your body and destroy your soul in hell. Matthew 10. I don't like that verse. It's uncomfortable. It seems like we shouldn't talk like that. But that's Jesus. He talked about that, right? So the fear of the Lord is something we have to have. Don't dumb it down. Some people say, well, it's just a respect. I don't think so. The Bible says fear, and you see plenty of stories in Scripture where people lost their fear of the Lord and they were destroyed or suffered severe consequences. It's a healthy fear, not just a respect that I better do this right or I'll waste my life. I love to talk to people, their different jobs, and learn about what many different people go through. So I always ask people in church a lot of times, hey, tell me where you work, what do you do, what's it like? So I know we have a lot of people in the trades. And this reminds me of what I've heard some electricians say, that as an electrician, even if they've been involved in it for years, full-time union electrician for decades, they have to remind themselves to fear the power of electricity. Because it's easy to get so comfortable with it. You work with it every day that you feel like you can do a shortcut. It's annoying to have to go through all the safety protocols. And in order to be more efficient, it's tempting to just do things more quickly. But the power of electricity can kill you, even if you're an experienced electrician, right? So there's a fear of that power, the fear of the Lord. So the revolution is about not just wanting things for ourselves, but choosing to live for God. This picture reminds me of it too. Think of life in the 1500s. So different than what we have now, right? They didn't have the technology. They didn't have hardly anything we have. How did they do it, right? How did they get by with, anything? Man, I wouldn't have wanted to get sick in the 1500s, right? What a different life. Well, they even had a hard time telling time. How do you tell time in the 1500s? They didn't have watches, phones. They had to go outside, look at the sun, and try and figure out if it's cloudy. You didn't know what time it was at all, right? So they tried for years and years. Scientists tried to figure out times and even travel in oceans. Astronomy was a huge deal, trying to figure out a sun, the moon, the stars. But the calculations were always a little off. They never quite lined up. They couldn't get a consistent way to map out distances, especially in the ocean, and also times. But one time, eventually, there was this man that had a different way of looking at it. His name was Copernicus. He was a Polish mathematician, and he looked at everything with times and the solar system. He said, maybe we got something backwards. You see, we all assume at that time that on Earth, we're the center of the solar system. It feels like we're stable, right? And the sun rises and the sun sets. Everything moves around us. But he said, maybe the sun is really stable. Even though it looks like it's moving, maybe the sun is in a fixed place. Maybe we're moving around the sun. How would that change how we look at it? Well, it wasn't a real popular idea because change is hard and it offends a lot of people that had for years promoted that the earth was the center of things. But eventually that theory turned out to be true, right? We revolve around the sun. It was a revolutionary breakthrough. It's called the Copernican Revolution, and it changed the way they figured out a lot of things, including timing and travel and so forth. Why? Because he said the center of things isn't us, it's the sun. I think about that spiritually. The natural thing in life is to say, it's all about me. What's going to make me happy? I let people into my life if they help me or if they make me happy. And maybe we have a business type of transaction sometimes, right? I want something from you, I give you something that you want, but it's all about what do I think will make me happy? Or I can choose to rotate my life around another person, but that's like being codependent, right? And that person isn't God and they can't really give me everything I need. So either I'm trying to get people to rotate around me or I'm rotating around other people, or maybe I say I'm all on my own, I'm just an island, but that's a lonely life. And again, we have that void in us. We're made in the image of God. We're made for something more. The Christian life is this: fear the Lord. There is a God who's all-powerful, all-knowing. He's everywhere. He is almighty. He created everything. He was there before anything else began. He is the source, the cause, the reason for everything. And we find our purpose in him. And he says, come and live your life around me. That changes everything, right? That's a revolution. If we expect God to come and rotate around us and say, hey, God, when I have a problem now and then, would you come over here? God is not like that for us. God is not like an insurance policy. That's human thinking, right? Like, I got my life going on. It's pretty good, but there's some problems that could come up. So, Lord, can I just pay an insurance premium? I'll do something for you. I'll go to church. I'll be involved a little bit so that if I have a problem, you'll send some blessing my way to get me out of this ditch, to help me out, to pay this bill, to fix this problem that I can't fit. Thank you, Lord, for doing that. I'll get back to you when I need you again. That's not the Christian life, okay? The Christian life is this: I give up being the center of my life. I'm not going to try and get everything to revolve around me. I believe my life purpose is found in God. And so I'm going to go and rotate around him and get as close as I can to him. And I'm going to hang out with other people that are going around him. That's called fellowship, right? And I'm going to get in a group. This is what a church is. A church isn't the center. The church itself, we're people. We can't give each other ultimately what we need. But the church is a group of people that say together, we're going to rotate around God. We're going to find our meaning in him. We're going to find forgiveness in him. We're going to find joy and happiness in him. We're going to find hope in him. He can provide what we need. He alone can meet those deepest parts in our soul. He alone can feed us what we need. Jesus said he is the bread of life. He says, if we are thirsty, come to him. He will meet our needs. So in rotating around God, it's like Jesus said, if you want to find your life, you have to give up your life. You have to lose your life to find it. Sounds kind of confusing, but the idea is, as long as I'm trying to find my life over here, I found the spot, it seems like it'll be fun. I'm just trying to get everything to go around me. Jesus says, give that up. Come and follow me. You might still work the same job, live in the same place, but you have a different purpose, a different motive. You're worshiping him. You're letting him be the authority in your life. Remember, the rich young ruler was told that, and he said, no, can't do it. Can't do it. Wouldn't give up being the center of his life. But so many people, often those that were down and out, said, yes, I'll follow you. And so they experienced that revolution. So that's where we begin to find our purpose, right? The rest of life is a lot of mist. If we put it in the center, a lot of those things just aren't substantial enough. They shouldn't be at the center, but a revolution puts the Lord in the center of our life. I love the beginning of this book, The Purpose-Driven Life. Remember that book, 2002? A lot of you have heard of it. Big seller, and if you don't have it, go ahead and get it. Literally, it's like 1 cent on Amazon. There's so many copies out there. You can get it for the cost of shipping. I like the beginning. It says, it's not about you. The purpose of your life is far greater than your own personal fulfillment, your peace of mind, or your happiness. Real good book. and it's a big seller because it really scratches that itch we have, right? What is my purpose? That's an awesome one. So, purpose, image, mist, revolution. Last word I want you to write down is race, okay? Race. I always have enjoyed exercise for a long time. And a couple years ago, I'm usually just a treadmill runner, though. I'm not a huge cardio guy. I like it, but just enough, right? And a couple years ago, though, I was talking to a couple people that were going to run a 5K that helped a ministry. So I said, I'll do it. I think I can do that. So I ran a 5K 2 summers ago. Really enjoyed it. It was fun being out there with people and trying to get the best time I could. Last year, I did the World Vision one because one of the brothers here was running in it. And they have a 6K, which is a little unusual. So, but this represents something in their ministry. So ran a 6K last year. I'm glad you're impressed, right? So that was good. This year, I'm looking for a 7K. Yeah, I think I'm just going to add a K every year until I get to a marathon. I don't think they have 7Ks. But it's enjoyable running. There's some good lessons, right? Obviously, you have to sign up for the race. You have to enroll. You have to stay on the course and run the right way. And you also know it's not good to compare yourself to others, right? If you look at certain people that are behind you, you could get real proud and get puffed up and think that you're better than you really are. And you wouldn't be motivated to push yourself if you compare yourself to people that just can't hardly run at all and you feel like you're better than them. On the other hand, you can get discouraged by other people. So this 6K, I was just, naturally saying, I just want to run as good as I can. I want to finish, first of all, and not fall over and make a fool out of myself, but I want to finish and keep running. And so I got near the end. I was like 100 yards from the finish line, feeling good about myself. And these two little kids, about 10 years old, ran right by me. Really fast. Seriously, I was so mad. I wanted to find them at the end and go, hey, did you run the whole race? Where's your mom and dad? Let me see your name tag. I think they just jumped in. Seriously, they ran right by me like I was standing still right at the end. The Lord keeps us humble, doesn't he? For real. But it's not good to compare yourself. You got to have your race in life and do what you're supposed to do. Some people are going to do other things. Some might seem faster or slower, but the Lord has a race for you. Look at what Hebrews 12 says. It talks about that. It says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, talking about examples in the Bible, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. So that means that when we're over here doing our own thing and our selfish living or sinful things that are against God, we're not going to be able to live the life he has for us. We're not going to fulfill his purpose. We're not going to experience that peace. We'll have that emptiness and all the frustration. So continually we have to come back and get free from all that junk that we tend to get pulled into. By the way, that's why worship is so important. Let me just pause and say, getting together, certainly on our own, we have to worship every day, but there's something about group worship, something about with other people and music. What an awesome tool, man, to be able to worship. And we have a great worship team. They're trained, they practice, they rehearse. More importantly, they are worshipers themselves. It's so good to be with them on Sundays. And I really enjoy, I'm refreshed by these times. And when we have midweek times. So I want to encourage you, don't miss it. Don't miss it. No one's going to take attendance on you if you're here on time. But I'm telling you, those are times to kind of get perspective again, to let go of the things that have gotten into your mind and your heart all week and get back to God being the center of your life. So we let go of that stuff. We have to continually get back into the race the Lord has for us. And then it says this, and let us run with perseverance, because life's tough, right? It's easy to want to quit or stop or go slow. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. So God has a call on your life. You need to figure out what it is. It comes through Jesus Christ. Look at what this says. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. In a few minutes, we're going to celebrate communion because, as it says here, it's Jesus that went ahead, that ran the race, died for our sins, made a bridge so we could get away from this selfish life. He prepared the way so we can enter into the life God has for us and experience the purpose he really has for us. So it comes through Jesus Christ, and then he has a race for us to run. He doesn't change your life just so that you can take it easy and be a spectator in the Christian life. He's got something for you to do. He has people for you to impact, right? Starting in your own family and the people that are involved in your life. There's things he wants to do. Some of them might be more public that a lot of people see. Some of them might be private that very few people know. But God has a purpose for you so that years from now, hopefully before your funeral, hopefully it's at a birthday or some happier occasion, people will say, thank you for talking to me years ago. Thank you for inviting me to this. Thank you for spending time to me when I was about to make a horrible decision. Thank you for being with me in my lowest part of life, right? Or if you're like someone that works with young people, I love those stories of teachers that have kids come back years later and say, thank you for what you did with us. And you helped me understand some things and figure life out. And you made a difference in my life. The Lord has a race for you. It's a beautiful race. And you'll discover it as you live with him and for him. Let me give you one more story before we close with communion. Thinking about figuring out what God has for us and having a relationship with God, allowing him to direct us into making decisions and where to go and what to do. It reminds me of this one couple we met that didn't know them very long, but it impacted our lives. My wife and I, for just about a year, when our kids were real little, we rented an apartment by Marquette Park. And interesting neighborhood, got to meet a lot of different people. I always enjoy talking to people from different backgrounds than me to understand how they view life and understand their way of thinking. And so there was a Muslim couple there, a guy and his wife. She wore the full head covering and the robe. And so at first I thought, they might not want to talk to me. But then, we had kids, so we bonded a little bit. Our kids were out in front together at the same time, and they were super friendly. And she was real outgoing and real talkative. And so I like to ask them about their life and everything. And they had grown up in the Middle East. And so I asked her one time, my wife and I were with her and the man was somewhere else. But I asked her one of my favorite couples questions. I like to say, tell me, how did you meet? I always like to ask people that. It's interesting to hear the stories of how a couple met. So I often ask people that at church. And sometimes people are like, I don't want to tell you. Okay, you don't have to tell me, right? Some people, but most people love to tell the story. So I always say, just edit the story. If you don't like, just make it a better story. Okay, come on. It's your story. You can fix it. All right? Come on. But so I might ask you someday how you met. So make up a good story if you're a couple. But this couple, I asked her, she gave me an answer I never heard before. I said, tell me, how did you and your husband meet? She said, I met my husband the day I married him. I said, wow, an arranged marriage. I've never talked to anyone that had an arranged marriage. So tell me, how did that work out? And she said, well, to tell you the truth, at first, I hated it. It was very difficult. I mean, I always lived at home with my family, and I'd never dated, and I knew this was something way in the future. I was used to this type of life. And then it was set up. I knew the date was coming. I had never met him because that was our culture, our tradition. And then the wedding day came and I was there and boom, he was right there next to me. We got married and off we went on our honeymoon and I didn't know this guy at all. It was really difficult and awkward. I was very unhappy. We had to get to know each other as a married couple. And she said, I was very unhappy in the beginning. She looked very sad. But then she lifted up her face and she said, but I knew it would all work out. And now we've been happily married for years. I said, wow. Why were you so confident that it would work out? What gave you that sense that it would be okay? And she said, well, in our culture, she said, the fathers decide who's going to get married. And so my father knew this family and he knew this man. And I figured my father, he loves me. I'm secure in his love. He is so wise. I trust his wisdom and his decision-making. And if my father says, this is the man for me to marry, then I knew that it would work out if I would just go along with it because I know my father. And I thought, wow, that's a little bit like the Christian life, isn't it? I mean, if you know who God is, as you experience his goodness, his guidance, and you begin to realize he knows everything. He knows you perfectly. He knows what you're wired for. He knows what you'll fit into and what you wouldn't fit with and what is good for you and what's bad for you. He has it mapped out. If you can hear his voice and go along with his plan, sometimes it'll seem awkward or difficult or painful at first. But if it's God's will, it's good for you. Finding your purpose. So God has a plan for you. It's a great plan. I hope that you've experienced that revolution in your life where the Lord is at the center. If not, you need to do that. And I hope you're in the race. And if not, get in the race. Find out what God has for you. It's the most fulfilling life.